When Andy's parents confronted him and insisted that he ask his fiancée for a DNA test, he was left bewildered and angered by their suspicions. What he soon discovered was something entirely unexpected. Andy had left his hometown to attend a prestigious college in the city, where he pursued a degree in theology with the aspiration of becoming a pastor. Andy was a devoted Christian with a contemporary understanding of the church that he wished to share with the world. In one of his theology classes, he crossed paths with a young woman named Jessica, with whom he quickly fell deeply in love. They attended church services together and organized prayer meetings on campus. Surprisingly, Jessica was originally from the same town as Andy, although their paths had never crossed despite the town's small size. As Jessica later remarked, stranger things have happened. Andy's father, Ronald, had always advised him not to delay and stressed the importance of acting promptly. However, Ronald never elaborated on this advice, leaving Andy to interpret it as gospel. Despite these warnings, Andy couldn't ignore his feelings for Jessica and decided to take action. After a Sunday church service, Andy invited Jessica for a stroll in the campus gardens. There, he got down on one knee and declared, "I don't want to waste another second when I'm with you. I feel complete, and I believe the Lord brought us together for a reason. Jessica, will you marry me?" Tears welled up in Jessica's eyes as she responded with a heartfelt yes. They shared a prayer as they embraced, watching the setting sun, eagerly looking forward to their return to their hometown once the semester was over. Andy was eager to introduce Jessica to his family, as he cherished his close-knit family ties and wanted Jessica to feel welcomed and embraced. During their time together, Jessica opened up about her struggles with feeling lost. She explained, "Why did you first join the church, Andy?" Andy inquired. To which Jessica replied, "A part of me felt like I didn't belong. I love my parents and my family, but I felt like I was going crazy. Like I was an alien or something. I followed my heart in search of belonging, and it led me to Jesus. The rest is history. I still feel out of place at times, but the power of prayer always guides me through it." Jessica confided that Andy was eerily similar to her father's ex, which struck Andy as uncanny. Determined to make Jessica feel at home, Andy went to great lengths to ensure she felt welcomed and loved. However, nothing could have prepared them for what came next. Andy arranged a get-together with his family to introduce Jessica, planning a pseudo-engagement party where all his relatives could meet her for the first time. As they arrived, his parents, Ronald and Carrie, came out to greet them. When Andy gestured toward his soon-to-be wife and said, "Mom and Dad, I'd like to introduce you to my fiancée, Jessica." Both Ronald and Carrie wore expressions as though they had seen a ghost. Ronald slowly offered Jessica a hug, his face turning as white as a sheet as he stammered, "Jessica, it's so nice to meet you." Carrie also appeared somewhat uneasy as she hugged Jessica, and Andy sensed that something was amiss. Ronald, with a curious look on his face, inquired, "By any chance, is your mother's name Rose?" As Andy observed this interaction with growing discomfort, Jessica replied, "No, my mom's name is Ashley," while seeking support from Andy with her gaze. Trying to ease the strange tension, Andy suggested, "Hey, Dad, why don't we get her settled in and introduce her to everybody? Shall we?" The brief pause led Andy and Jessica to hope for a small wedding ceremony before the next semester began. As Jessica sat inside, making wedding plans, Carrie took Andy into the kitchen for a private conversation. Jessica had been feeling a constant watchful gaze upon her ever since her introduction to the family, and she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that she was the subject of gossip. And not for positive reasons. In the kitchen, Carrie spoke with an unusual sense of urgency. Listen, Andy. I'm not sure if you noticed, but your dad and I were taken aback when we met Jessica. She confided in a hushed tone. Really, Mom? A blind man could have seen how awkward you and Dad were acting. Andy responded. Well, some things are just really awkward, Andy. Listen closely. We have to do a DNA test on Jessica. She is a spitting image of Dad's ex-girlfriend, Rose. It's uncanny, Carrie said, glancing around nervously. Come on, Mom. You sound crazy. We've already discussed this. Andy replied, trying to soothe his mother's concerns. Is that why Dad was asking about her mom? Jessica said her mom's name is Ashley. Nobody in her family has ever heard of us. And vice versa. You guys are being really weird about this. Let it go, Mom. Later. Andy spoke to Jessica about his conversation with his mother. Jessica was visibly stressed about the wedding details and had a habit of pulling at her hair when nervous. She responded. First of all, I think it's kind of cute that I have a doppelganger. At least it explains why I've felt like I'm being watched all the time. But it's just a rumor, my love. It'll pass. More importantly, how can I plan this whole thing in such a short time? Andy reassured her. Even if you arrange it perfectly, people will probably end up sitting where they want to sit. Let's go for a walk to unwind, he suggested. After Andy and Jessica left the house for a walk through the yard, Carrie seized the opportunity to discreetly collect one of Jessica's loose hair strands from the table. 2 weeks later, the wedding day was about to begin. And both Andy and Jessica were overwhelmed with nerves. Andy was dressed in his late grandfather's suit, while Jessica wore her grandmother's old wedding dress. Both waited patiently for the ceremony to begin. Meanwhile, Ronald and Carrie had just received a letter in the mail. They opened the letter and read it slowly twice over. Afterward, they exchanged grim expressions. I can't believe it, Ronald exclaimed. What are you waiting for? Go and show Andy. Hurry, Carrie shouted. Ronald rushed to find his son in the men's changing rooms at the church. Andy was adjusting his suit when his dad walked in, visibly out of breath. Dad, are you okay? Andy asked. I'm really sorry, son. I wish there was another way we could have figured this all out, Ronald replied as he handed Andy the envelope. Confused, Andy read through the letter, and a look of despair washed over his face. Without a second thought, Andy hurried to Jessica's changing room. Meanwhile, Ronald called Carrie to join him in following Andy. When Andy arrived in Jessica's changing room, she saw that he was flustered. Are you and Dad my real parents, Andy? What's wrong? You shouldn't be back here, you know it's bad luck to see the bride in her wedding dress. Jessica said. Babe, I have to tell you. We need to call off the wedding. They were right. Everyone was right. Your mom, Ashley, is not your real mom. Andy blurted out, barely able to form the words. Calm down, Andy. You sound crazy. We've already spoken about this. Everybody's making up rumors because I look like your dad's ex-girlfriend from decades ago. Big whoop. Jessica replied. Just look, Jessica, Andy said as he handed her the envelope. My mom secretly got a test done somehow. Even though I told her not to and disagreed, she did it anyway. I'm still trying to figure this all out. But this test confirms one thing for sure. Ronald is your dad. You're my sister. Jessica sat down slowly in her seat as her hands began to tremble. She couldn't believe what she was reading. Feeling like her entire world was crashing down, she immediately called her parents, who were waiting in the church hall for the ceremony to start. "Hi, Angel. You're not getting cold feet, are you? Should I come to the changing room?" Ashley asked. "Are you and Dad my real parents?" Jessica asked immediately. "What do you mean?" Ashley responded as she hurried out of the church hall. "Are you and Dad my birth parents? Did you give birth to me?" Jessica reiterated. Ashley hesitated, clutching her purse tighter before taking a deep breath and responding. "No, Jessica. You were adopted. You were left at the door of an orphanage. Your father and I thought that since we couldn't find any information about your real parents, we could just raise you as our own. And it wouldn't matter. Please forgive us, Angel." Ashley replied. But Jessica dropped the call. Ronald and Carrie slowly entered her changing room and asked Andy to sit next to Jessica. He held Jessica's hand. But for the first time since they'd met, there was no intimacy. Ronald began to explain. "Years ago, I dated a woman named Rose. We were planning on getting married and starting a family. One day, out of the blue, Rose vanished without a trace. She was just gone. We reported her missing and looked everywhere for her. But we couldn't find her. Everyone in the family knew Rose, Andy. Your mother was Rose's best friend. That's how we met. I ended up falling for your mother. And Rose became something of a memory. We always wondered about her and whether she would ever come back. And then, 3 weeks ago, you brought home Jessica. It was as if you had brought Rose home. Jessica's not just a doppelganger. It was as if you'd cloned Rose. We didn't know what to do. But we knew something was amiss. So, your mom got sneaky and did a DNA test. We had to know. I'm sorry it ended up like this, kids. You guys go out and talk. I'll talk to the family." Ronald told Andy and Jessica. Andy and Jessica left through the back door without saying a word to catch their breath and take a stroll before facing the family. Ronald and Carrie went to the church hall to inform the guests that the wedding was cancelled due to the new information. Everyone was stunned to learn that the rumors were true. Ronald and Carrie also comforted Ashley and her husband Jacob, who were both riddled with guilt for keeping the truth from Jessica for so long. As Andy and Jessica walked through the garden together, neither knew exactly what to say to the other. "So, I know that things are bizarre right now. But there is a bright side to it," Andy said. "Yeah, I think I know what you're going to say," Jessica replied. "You were right all those years. You weren't crazy. You've had a whole family that you didn't know about. And they were in the same town as you this whole time. So, let's ignore the awkward stuff and focus on that. Welcome to the family, Jessica. I promise they're much less weird when they haven't seen a ghost." Andy responded. "Thanks, bro." Jessica replied awkwardly. "Yeah, that's going to take some getting used to," Andy retorted. The two returned to the church changing rooms, got changed, and as they walked out into the church hall, their family waited to welcome Jessica with open arms. Everyone was glad to have Jessica with them, and she was happy to have found a new family. Dorothy and her husband, Michael, decided to separate a few months after their son, Aiden, was born. Their strained relationship made the situation with their baby even more challenging. Fortunately, the couple managed to reach an agreement that would ensure the happiness of both Aiden and themselves. The agreement involved Aiden rotating between his parents. Michael would have him for 1 week, and Dorothy would have him the following week. This arrangement allowed them to spend equal time with their son and ensure he grew up with both his parents. However, one day, Dorothy noticed something that left her questioning her ex-husband's motives. During one of Aiden's weeks with her, she observed an unusual behavior. At about midday, Aiden walked into the living room, pulled on his pants, and stared into them. Dorothy watched him for a moment but continued with her tasks, initially thinking he would go back to playing. However, he did not. He remained standing and gazing into his pants for half an hour. Dorothy initially brushed it off, thinking it might be a momentary curiosity. Yet, the behavior recurred the next day, and the day after that throughout the entire week that Aiden spent with her. Each time, he would pause to stare into his pants for an extended period. Dorothy found this behavior entirely new and began to wonder if there was a reason behind it. Aiden was a curious little boy, like many children his age, showing fascination with everything he saw and often responding with adorable curiosity. Dorothy considered whether his behavior was just a manifestation of his curiosity. However, when it continued during his next visit to her, she decided to give him a closer look. Just to be sure, Dorothy laid Aiden down and checked his legs. But she found nothing indicating that something was bothering him. The fact that she didn't find anything left her puzzled. There had to be a reason for Aiden's strange behavior. It couldn't be mere coincidence. Moreover, his curiosity should have had him moving on as soon as he satisfied his interest. The following day, the same pattern repeated itself, once again occurring around lunchtime. At precisely 12:13 p.m., Dorothy began to wonder if the timing was significant. On the next day, at the exact same time, Aiden walked into the living room, pulled on his pants, and stared at whatever had caught his attention. After Aiden returned to his father's house, Dorothy's friend, Olivia, came to visit her. Dorothy was still trying to make sense of her son's strange behavior, and she decided to confide in her friend, Olivia. After hearing the whole story, Olivia suggested something that left Dorothy with suspicions about her ex-husband. Could he be responsible for what was happening to their son? Dorothy had started dating a new boyfriend a few weeks before Aiden's odd behavior began. And just a few days after Michael found out about it, he slipped a letter into her mailbox. In that letter, he wrote hurtful things. But one threat stood out among the rest. He vowed to make her life miserable. Dorothy wondered if this could be the reason behind Aiden's behavior. Did his father teach him to act this way so that she would be in a constant state of worry? Or was there more to it? Could it be possible that he was using their son to spy on her? Dorothy didn't want to believe it. But Michael had already shown jealousy over her new relationship. And she couldn't ignore the idea that he might be orchestrating something. The more she contemplated it, the more plausible the idea of spying sounded. Dorothy worked a half-day job and returned home just before noon, which was precisely when Aiden started behaving oddly. Michael knew her schedule, and she began to suspect that he might have hidden a recording device or chip in Aiden's clothing, which explained why he was looking into his pants at the same time every day. With this theory in mind, Dorothy decided to investigate further. She picked up her son and took him to the changing station, undressed him, and meticulously checked his skin for any anomalies. Then, she turned her attention to his clothing, searching every inch, checking every seam, and even examining his diaper. However, she couldn't find any sign of a hidden chip. The last place left to check was his shoes. But even after a thorough examination, Dorothy couldn't find any evidence of a hidden tracking device. She was left feeling defeated, unable to confirm her suspicions. Despite not finding any concrete evidence, Dorothy remained convinced that Michael was spying on her and using their son as part of his plan. In an attempt to catch him in his own trap, Dorothy came up with an idea. She was in the same room as Aiden when she picked up her phone and called the police. She explained the situation to them, detailing what was happening. The police took her concerns seriously, especially since there was an infant involved, and they immediately dispatched officers to her location. Simultaneously, another unit was sent to Michael's place. The police promptly arrested Michael and took him in for questioning, leaving Dorothy feeling smug as she sat in her chair at home. She was confident that Michael would regret his decision to spy on her once the police got involved. However, what happened next left her completely bewildered. The police took Michael to the station for questioning, while Dorothy remained at home, anticipating her small victory. She had no inkling that the police would come knocking at her door as well. Hearing a knock on her door, Dorothy wondered who could be interrupting her in the middle of her plan. She approached the door and looked through the peephole. When she saw who was waiting outside, her blood ran cold. Why were the police at her doorstep? They were supposed to take Michael, not her. She had no choice but to let them in. With a smile, the officer greeted her and delivered news that she didn't expect. While she believed her suspicions about Michael were correct, the officer explained what they had learned from her ex-husband. They had taken him to a holding room at the local precinct and started questioning him about the spying accusations. However, the strangest thing was that Michael appeared to be exceptionally skilled at lying. He feigned ignorance about the situation and acted as if he had no idea what they were talking about regarding any form of spying. When they mentioned the chip in his son's pants, he acted genuinely surprised. This revelation left Dorothy bewildered. Nothing seemed to make sense to her. If Michael had truly been eavesdropping on her, he should have known that the police were coming. Dorothy felt frightened and questioned whether Michael was truly capable of such deception. The officer at Dorothy's house explained the real reason for his visit. They needed to take special measures to ensure that her son wasn't in any real danger. With Dorothy's permission, the officer pulled out a device to scan for spy chips on her son. He assured her that it would be harmless and take only a minute. Aiden greeted the police officer with giggles, thinking it was nothing more than a game. The officer scanned Aiden carefully, searching for any spy chips. After 5 minutes of examination, he made a shocking discovery. The officer looked up at Dorothy, who anxiously awaited the results. He shook his head and said, "Well, it's good news. I can't find anything on your son." Dorothy was left conflicted, wondering if there was genuinely nothing to worry about or if Michael was more cunning than she had thought. The officer left Dorothy's house, promising to update her on any new details. Dorothy had some time to contemplate the bizarre situation. Just as she felt like she was going insane from not knowing what was happening, she received an unexpected phone call. Surprisingly, it was from her ex-husband, Michael. She couldn't fathom why he was calling. Was he going to issue threats again or reveal that he was aware of her actions? Reluctantly, she answered the phone, eager to find out what he knew. However, what Michael had to say took her by surprise. He seemed unaware that she was the one who had called the authorities. He asked if the police had come to her doorstep, inquiring about Aiden. Dorothy decided it was time to come clean and explained that she was the one who had called the police. She mentioned the threatening letter and Aiden's strange behavior as the reasons for her actions. Michael's response was unexpected. He apologized for everything, claiming that he had sent the threatening letter in the heat of the moment and didn't mean what he said. Regarding the spy chip, he swore he would never do anything like that to their son. Dorothy was left puzzled and worried, not knowing the truth behind Aiden's actions. She questioned if Aiden exhibited the same behavior when he was with Michael. And surprisingly, he confirmed that at around 12:13, Aiden would pull down his pants and stare down. This consistency in Aiden's behavior with both of them left Dorothy even more concerned. as she remained unsure about the cause. Dorothy needed to find a solution quickly. With no one else to turn to, she asked Michael for his thoughts on the situation. Together, they came up with a potential solution, taking Aiden to the doctor. Despite Aiden's reluctance to visit the doctor, they believed it was essential to figure out what was happening. Dorothy scheduled an appointment with her local doctor and took Aiden for an examination, though it was a challenge to get him into the car. In the doctor's examination room, the doctor used a lollipop to distract Aiden, promising he could keep it if he cooperated during the examination. After a thorough check, the doctor concluded that Aiden was perfectly healthy, and no obvious signs indicated the cause of his behavior. The doctor recommended keeping an eye on Aiden for further details. Dorothy left the doctor's office feeling disappointed, hoping for a definitive answer. Over the next few days, she observed Aiden carefully, but he continued the same behavior like clockwork. She was determined to uncover the truth and began researching online to determine whether such behavior was normal for a child of his age. Dorothy delved into research, even consulting parenting books and online resources to understand Aiden's peculiar behavior. Her relentless search led her to a disheartening conclusion: there was no explanation or similar behavior documented in any of the materials she consulted. Aiden's actions remained a baffling mystery, leaving Dorothy deeply concerned. Then, her phone rang, and the caller ID displayed her doctor's contact. She answered, curious about what news he might have regarding her son. The doctor informed Dorothy that he wanted to see Aiden as soon as possible and promptly scheduled an appointment for the following day. Dorothy couldn't help but feel a heightened sense of unease. What could the doctor have discovered about Aiden's behavior? The doctor's approach was unorthodox and quite unexpected. He asked Dorothy to bring Aiden to the appointment at noon, a precise time linked to Aiden's unusual behavior. Dorothy prepared Aiden for the visit, ensuring he was dressed nicely and armed with a lollipop, which might help him cooperate. She still didn't comprehend the significance of the noon appointment until they arrived at the doctor's office. As they entered the examination room, it was evident that the doctor was more concerned than before. He explained his intention to wait until the exact moment when Aiden typically exhibited the unusual behavior. At 12:13 p.m., the time approached, and everyone in the room anxiously observed Aiden, wondering if he would perform his peculiar routine. Surprisingly, Aiden didn't engage in his customary behavior at the expected time, leaving everyone puzzled. The doctor then took an unexpected step. He walked to the other side of the room, turned on the radio, and inquired about Dorothy's favorite station. Perplexed, Dorothy shared the station number, and the doctor tuned it in. After returning to his chair, he observed Aiden closely. To Dorothy's astonishment, Aiden immediately pulled down his pants and stared downward. But it was happening now rather than a few moments earlier. The doctor's smile widened as he felt confident enough to share his explanation. Dorothy braced herself for the revelation. The doctor proposed his theory, asking if Dorothy typically had the radio on around noon. She affirmed this routine, prompting the doctor's smile to broaden even further. Then, he disclosed his insight, which left Dorothy utterly stunned. He explained that her son was merely attempting to dance along to the radio. Aiden's actions were his way of expressing himself, an attempt to dance without knowing how to do so. He would grow out of it with a bit of encouragement. Dorothy decided to sign Aiden up for baby dance classes, where he learned to dance properly, and his spontaneous act of dropping his pants never occurred again.